And the third sort of creativity, if you like, rests on that. The third is what I call transformational creativity. And in transformational creativity, what happens is that somebody comes up with something which seems to be not only new, but impossible. The sort of surprise that you get is deeply different from the sort of surprise you get from the other two sorts of creativity, because it's something which previously you would have thought was impossible, and indeed previously it was impossible, because what's gone on there is that the person who's coming up with a new idea has altered one or more of the stylistic rules that had existed before. So they're breaking the rules, right? They aren't breaking all of the rules. So we haven't got something absolutely new, but they're breaking some of the rules, and because they're breaking some of the rules, and they may be relatively superficial rules or relatively fundamental rules, you know, in the grammar, if you like, of the style, because they're breaking rules, and in particular if they're breaking the deeper rules, they're going to get opposition. They're going to get people saying, that couldn't be true, that's nonsense. It's very, very common in art, very, very common in art, but it's also very common in science. And there are many examples, if you look in history, of people, scientists as well as artists, who came up with an idea at the time, they were just scorned, they were laughed at. And in some cases they died that way. I mean, their ideas were never appreciated until after their death, and you can all think of examples. And the reason is that one or more rules have been, of the previously existing and accepted style, have been broken. So then it's up to people's judgment as to whether or not they value this new idea, this new structure, and how they can understand it. And we understand things, broadly speaking, by putting them into familiar patterns, thinking of them in terms of familiar patterns. Now, by definition, transformational creativity is changing the pattern to some extent, right? And the more the pattern is being changed, the more difficulty people are going to have in understanding it. And again, I'm sure you can all think of lots of examples, both on the science side of the fence and on the art side of the fence. And actually, one of the things that seems to me it's important to realize about creativity is, in terms of generating the new ideas, you're coming up with the new ideas, there's no fundamental difference between art and science. In the valuation of those ideas, there is a huge difference, of course, because in science you have to have a certain sort of rigor, you have to have a way of getting everybody to agree, hence the experimental method, you know, blah, 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 blah. So there is a huge difference in the valuation. But in terms of coming up with new ideas, there isn't.